The morning sun washed over Pine Hollow, painting the courthouse steps gold. Sheriff Daniel Rourke stood there, shaking hands, tipping his hat, and flashing the same polished smile that had earned him the town's devotion. Every face that passed him reflected trust, the kind that comes easy when a man wears a badge and speaks with calm authority. To the townspeople, Daniel wasn't just their sheriff, he was their anchor. The man who rescued lost children, broke up bar fights with grace, and bowed his head in church every Sunday. Mothers waved as he patrolled, old men offered him coffee. They called him a good one, a rare, decent man in a crooked world. But the gold of reputation hides rust underneath. At home, Daniel's marriage had been eroding for years. Margaret, his wife, had grown distant, not angry, just silent. Their conversations were mechanical, reduced to bills and schedules. Daniel told himself it was normal, that duty sometimes came before domestic peace. But deep down, he hated the emptiness waiting in his own house. That morning, he polished his badge longer than usual, watching his reflection in the metal. The man staring back didn't feel real anymore. The applause, the respect, it all blurred into a hum that never filled the hollow space inside him. At the annual town fair that weekend, Pine Hollow came alive with laughter and fried dough. Children darted between stalls, gospel music echoed from the stage. Daniel worked the crowd, shaking hands and kissing babies, his smile fixed perfectly in place. That's when he saw her. A teenage girl stood by the lemonade stand, handing out paper cups. Layla Brooks, 17, bright-eyed, with a quiet grace that made her seem older than her years. Her laughter carried over the noise, soft but magnetic. She wore a yellow sundress, simple yet radiant under the afternoon sun. For a brief moment, Daniel's world slowed. He told himself it was nothing, just a kind face, a reminder of youth and innocence. Yet when she looked up and caught his gaze, something inside him stirred, something he didn't want to name. He turned away quickly, forcing his smile back on. "Sheriff Rourke," a man called from a nearby booth. "We're proud of you, sir. Pine Hollow's lucky to have you." Daniel nodded, heart pounding harder than it should. The praise, once sweet, now felt heavy, like a mask he couldn't take off. From the corner of his eye, he saw Layla's mother, Evelyn, watching him with quiet suspicion. As twilight fell, Daniel walked alone to his patrol car. The laughter of the fair faded behind him. Inside, the silence was thick, the kind that invites dangerous thoughts. He started the engine, headlights cutting through the dusk, and whispered to himself, "Just another face in town. That's all." But even as he drove off, the echo of her laughter followed him, a sound that would soon become the beginning of his ruin. Rain came without warning that evening, sweeping through Pine Hollow in sheets that blurred the streetlights into halos. Sheriff Daniel Rourke sat in his cruiser outside the high school, watching the students scatter beneath umbrellas. He told himself he was there on patrol, routine, nothing more. But when he saw Layla Brooks standing alone at the bus stop, soaked to the bone, his pulse quickened. She hugged her school books to her chest, shivering. The bus was late, maybe canceled. Her small figure looked fragile against the storm. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering over the steering wheel, until finally he lowered the window. "Need a ride home?" he called, his voice carrying over the rain. Layla blinked, startled. "Sheriff Rourke?" "Oh, I'm okay, sir. The bus should be here." He smiled, the same reassuring grin everyone trusted. "That bus might not come tonight. Come on, I'll take you home. You'll catch a cold out here." She hesitated, then nodded, clutching her bag as she slipped into the passenger seat. The cruiser's warmth swallowed her. The soft hum of the heater filled the silence. "Thank you," she murmured. "Don't thank me," he replied gently. "You're part of this town. I look after my own." They drove through the rain, wipers slashing rhythmically. The town blurred by in muted colors, neon signs, wet asphalt, the faint glow of a diner through fogged glass. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel her presence like static in the air. "So," he said, voice casual, "how's school treating you?" Layla gave a small laugh. "It's fine. Mostly boring." "Boring's good," he said. "Means you're staying out of trouble." She smiled faintly. "Guess so." A few minutes passed before she asked, "Do you always drive around this late?" "Part of the job," he answered. "Keeps me from thinking too much." Her head turned slightly. "About what?" He paused, then chuckled softly. "About how quiet life can get when people stop needing you." She didn't know how to reply. The words lingered, something sad beneath the practiced charm. When they reached her neighborhood, the rain had eased to a mist. Daniel pulled up beside the Brooks' modest house, peeling paint, porch light flickering. The front curtain shifted. Her mother's silhouette stood there, watching. "Thank you again, Sheriff," Layla said, opening the door. "Anytime," he replied. "You stay safe, all right?" She nodded, stepping out into the drizzle. Her yellow jacket glowed under the streetlight as she hurried toward the porch. Evelyn Brooks opened the door before she reached it, eyes sharp and searching. Daniel caught Evelyn's glare through the windshield, cold, unblinking, protective. For a second, their eyes locked. He looked away first, putting the car in gear. As he drove off, he caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror, mother and daughter standing in the doorway, shadows framed by light. He told himself it was just kindness. A ride home, nothing more. But as he turned the corner, Layla's laughter from the fair echoed in his mind again, haunting and sweet, and he knew he'd find a reason to see her again. The days after that rainy night blurred together, but Sheriff Daniel Rourke couldn't shake the image of Layla Brooks, her quiet smile, her voice soft yet sure. What had started as a fleeting fascination began to fester into obsession. He told himself it was harmless, concern for a bright young girl with too much loneliness in her eyes. But concern turned into messages, then calls, and finally, visits that lasted too long. He started showing up near her school under the guise of community checks. Teachers waved, thinking it sweet that the sheriff looked out for their students. Layla would spot his cruiser parked beneath the oak tree, his nod like a secret between them. At first, she felt flattered. Daniel listened to her in a way no one else did. He asked about her dreams, her art, the music she loved. In his voice, she found comfort, a warmth she mistook for safety. Sometimes, he'd tell her, people forget that the ones who protect can be lonely too. Layla didn't know what to say to that. She was 17, too young to understand the depth of manipulation, too eager to be seen. Their meetings moved from hallways to quiet parking lots, from friendly chats to whispered secrets. Daniel brought her coffee one morning, saying, "You look tired. Thought you could use something warm." The small gesture made her blush. He noticed, and it thrilled him. At home, Margaret Rourke noticed her husband's distance, the late-night patrols, the phone turned face down at dinner. When she asked, he brushed it off. "Paperwork," he said, smiling the way politicians do when they lie. One evening, Daniel found Layla sitting alone near the fairgrounds, sketching by the fading light. Her notebook was open, filled with drawings of faces, one of them unmistakably his. "You drew me?" he asked softly, crouching beside her. She laughed nervously. "It's just practice." He looked at the page longer than necessary. "You've got talent," he murmured. "Real talent." Her cheeks warmed. "You really think so?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't." The air between them thickened, silence heavy with unspoken things. The sound of cicadas buzzed through the dusk. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She froze, unsure whether to move or stay. His hand lingered too long. "Daniel," she whispered, uncertain. "It's okay," he said, voice low. "I'd never hurt you." The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. They trapped her. Before she could speak again, he leaned in and kissed her, brief but enough to fracture something inside them both. When he pulled away, he looked dazed, almost frightened by what he'd done. "Don't tell anyone," he said quickly. "They wouldn't understand. They'd hurt you, and me." Layla's heart pounded. "I didn't mean." He interrupted softly, "It's our secret, okay?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, guilt and confusion twisting in her chest. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, trying to convince herself it wasn't wrong, that maybe this was love, not fear. Across town, Daniel sat in his cruiser by the dark lake, gripping the steering wheel. Rain began to fall again, tapping against the glass like a warning. He knew he'd crossed a line he could never uncross, and yet, the thought of stopping felt impossible. In the faint reflection of the windshield, his badge gleamed back at him, once a symbol of honor, now tainted with desire. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Sunday mornings in Pine Hollow always smelled of rain-soaked pine and hymn books. The town gathered faithfully at Grace Baptist Church, where gossip dressed itself as prayer. On that particular morning, the pews hummed with quiet talk, not about scripture, but about Sheriff Daniel Rourke and a young girl who'd been seen in his company more than once. It started as murmurs, a ride here, a smile there. Then the whispers grew teeth. "He's been too friendly with that Brooks girl," one woman said, fanning herself. "Late nights, school visits, you don't think?" Her friend gasped softly, crossing herself. From the back row, Evelyn Brooks sat rigid, jaw tight. She heard the gossip but said nothing. Her daughter, Layla, sat beside her, eyes fixed on the pulpit, pretending not to notice. Evelyn had seen the change in her, distracted, distant, quieter than usual. When she'd asked about the sheriff, Layla brushed it off. "He's just helping me with things, Mom." But Evelyn wasn't blind. She knew the tone of a man's interest, had seen it before in the world's cruelties. And this time, it was pointed at her daughter. After the service, Daniel stood at the church entrance, shaking hands as usual, the polished image of authority. His smile never faltered, though he felt the weight of eyes on him. When Evelyn approached, he straightened. "Morning, Mrs. Brooks," he greeted, tipping his hat. She met his gaze coolly. "Morning, Sheriff." Her voice carried the sharp edge of a mother's warning. Layla lingered behind her, silent, clutching her Bible like a shield. "Everything all right?" Daniel asked, forcing casualness. "Just fine," Evelyn said. "I hear you've been generous with your time lately." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone smooth. "Just looking out for folks, ma'am. That's part of the job." "I'm sure it is," she replied, eyes narrowing. "Still, some things ain't your job." The tension between them hung thick in the air. Churchgoers pretended not to notice but stole glances as they passed. Layla's heart raced. She could feel both their gazes, her mother's suspicion and Daniel's quiet warning. Later that evening, Layla texted him, "She's starting to suspect." His reply came fast. "Let me handle it. Don't worry." But worry was all she could do. Every interaction felt dangerous now, every meeting stolen in shadows. Daniel's tone had changed too, his messages shorter, sharper. The tenderness from before began to twist into control. One night, as thunder rolled outside, he called her. "People are talking," he said, voice low. "You need to be careful what you say. Understand?" "I haven't said anything," she whispered. "I know. I just can't afford mistakes. You wouldn't want to ruin both our lives, would you?" Layla hesitated, tears in her voice. "No, sir." He softened slightly. "Good girl. Just trust me." The line went dead. Layla stared at the phone, fear crawling through her chest. Down the hall, Evelyn's voice called for her to come to dinner. Layla wiped her eyes and forced a smile she didn't feel. Outside, the church bell tolled faintly in the wind, as if warning that secrets whispered in pews were about to grow louder, spreading beyond the sanctuary's walls. By early spring, the tension around Layla Brooks had become impossible to hide. She moved through her days in a fog, sleepless, pale, and constantly watching her phone. The once bright girl who painted and laughed now seemed hollowed out. Evelyn Brooks noticed every detail, but each time she tried to reach her daughter, Layla retreated deeper into silence. The secret was growing, literally. One morning, as Layla dressed for school, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her abdomen. The faint curve that hadn't been there before was undeniable. Panic rushed through her veins. She sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding so hard it hurt. She texted Daniel Rourke. "I think I'm pregnant." The reply came after several minutes that felt like hours. "Don't text this stuff. I'll handle it. Meet me after school." At work, Daniel's composure cracked for the first time. His deputy noticed his shaking hands as he filled out a report. "You all right, Sheriff?" the man asked. Fine, Daniel snapped, forcing a smile. Just fine. That evening, Layla waited by the old water tower where they used to meet. The sky burned orange, fading into purple. When Daniel's cruiser finally pulled up, her relief turned to dread. His face was hard, eyes cold. You should have been more careful, he hissed as soon as she got in. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't do this alone. He exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. You don't understand what this means, Layla. If anyone finds out, they'll know you did something wrong, she cut in, her voice shaking. You said you loved me. His eyes flashed. I said I cared about you. There's a difference. The words hit her like a slap. Silence filled the car, thick and suffocating. Finally, he said, softer but deadly, you can't keep it. It's not an option. Layla turned away, tears streaking her cheeks. I can't do that. It's mine too. Daniel's jaw clenched. You're a child. You don't know what you're saying. Her voice broke. Then why did you make me feel like I mattered? He didn't answer. The sound of rain started tapping against the windshield again, as if nature itself remembered their first sin. When he dropped her off near home, she could barely breathe. Don't tell anyone, he warned, eyes narrowing. You hear me? She nodded, terrified. The cruiser's taillights disappeared into the mist, leaving her standing alone in the dark. Inside the house, Evelyn waited at the kitchen table, arms folded. On the counter beside her sat a small white stick with a pink line, the one she'd found in the trash. What is this, Layla? Evelyn demanded, her voice trembling between anger and fear. Layla froze. It's nothing. It's not mine. Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. Don't you lie to me. You're my child. I can see what's happening. Layla's tears spilled over. You wouldn't understand, she whispered. Try me. But the truth lodged in her throat like glass. Saying his name would destroy everything, her mother's trust, her own safety, maybe even her life. So she lied again. It was a boy from school. He's gone. Evelyn's eyes softened just slightly, heartbreak replacing fury. You should have told me sooner. Layla nodded, forcing sobs to sound like relief. Upstairs, she locked herself in her room and collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach. Her phone buzzed, another message from Daniel. We'll fix this. Tomorrow night. Don't tell anyone. She stared at the words, dread curling in her chest. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, low, steady, and full of warning. The next night came heavy with humidity, the kind that clung to the skin and made the air hard to breathe. Layla Brooks sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. Every vibration made her jump. Her mother had fallen asleep in the next room, but Layla couldn't close her eyes, not after reading Sheriff Daniel Rourke's last message. Meet me behind the diner. We need to talk, alone. Her instincts screamed to ignore it, but fear ruled her now. She slipped on her jacket, moving quietly past the creaky hallway floorboards, and disappeared into the night. Daniel was already waiting by his cruiser, headlights off, face shadowed. The moment she approached, he grabbed her wrist. Where's your phone? He demanded. In my pocket. He snatched it and scanned her messages, then shoved it back. You haven't told anyone? No, she whispered. I swear. He stepped closer, his tone sharp and cold. You think you can keep this secret forever? You're not strong enough. You'll crack, and when you do, I'll lose everything. Tears filled her eyes. I'm not trying to hurt you. I don't know what to do. You'll do what I tell you, he snapped. You'll take care of it and then this goes away. Understand? Her lip trembled. I can't. Daniel slammed his hand against the car, making her flinch. You don't have a choice, Layla. You think anyone will believe you over me? I'm the sheriff. You're just... He stopped himself, breathing hard. The venom in his words hung in the air. Just what? She whispered. He looked at her, really looked, and something like guilt flickered in his eyes. Go home, he muttered, turning away. You'll ruin us both. Layla took a step back, trembling. You already ruined me, she said softly. He froze, but she was already running down the dirt path, the sound of her sobs swallowed by the night. Back home, Layla sat in her darkened room, shaking. Her mind replayed his threats, his anger, the fear that crawled under her skin. Then, a thought struck her, one of desperation and defiance. She picked up her phone, opened the voice recorder, and whispered to herself, "If anything happens to me, it was Daniel Rourke. He said he'd fix this. He said I'd ruin him." She hit save, and tucked the phone beneath her pillow. Across town, Margaret Rourke lay awake in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Daniel hadn't come home. She'd grown used to the lies, but lately they carried a different weight. His uniform shirts smelled faintly of perfume, and he guarded his phone like a weapon. That night, when she finally looked through his jacket pocket, she found a motel receipt, dated just 3 weeks earlier. The name beside his own made her heart stop. Layla Brooks? Margaret sat motionless, bow rising in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to believe it was coincidence. But the truth was staring her in the face, ugly and undeniable. She picked up the receipt again, her hands trembling. By dawn, 3 lives had begun to unravel, a predator desperate to hide, a wife on the edge of discovery, and a girl caught between fear and survival. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance, a lonely cry cutting through the fog, heralding the violence yet to come. The sun had barely set when Layla Brooks received the message that would seal her fate. "Meet me at Miller's Lake. We'll end this for good." The words glowed cold on her screen. Her hands trembled as she read them. A part of her prayed Daniel meant to take responsibility, maybe even confess. But another part, the one that remembered the rage in his eyes the night before, whispered something darker. Still she went. Fear and hope can look the same in the dark. The lake sat at the edge of Pine Hollow, surrounded by tall pines that swallowed the light. Mist floated over the water, and the air smelled of mud and gasoline. Daniel's cruiser was already there, headlights dim, his figure barely visible against the fading sky. Layla's footsteps crunched softly on gravel as she approached. "You said we were gonna fix this," she called. He turned slowly, hands buried in his pockets. His voice was low. "We are. But not the way you think." Her heart thudded. "What does that mean?" "It means you've left me no choice," he said, stepping closer. "I built everything in this town. My badge, my name, they're all I have. You'd take that from me." "I didn't tell anyone," she cried. "I swear I didn't." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Secrets don't stay buried long here. Someone always digs them up." Tears blurred her vision. "Daniel, please. I loved you." He flinched at the sound of his name from her lips, a reminder of what he'd lost control of. "You think love fixes this? Love ruins people, Layla. It already ruined me." Lightning flashed far off in the distance, illuminating his face. The warmth that once drew her in was gone. What remained was a stranger, cold, desperate, and cornered. Layla backed away slowly. "I'm leaving," she whispered. "You can forget me. I'll go away. No one has to know." But Daniel stepped forward, blocking her path. His hand went to her arm, gripping too tightly. "You can't just disappear. Someone will ask questions." "I'll tell them nothing," she pleaded. "I promise." Her voice broke as he pulled her closer, shaking his head. "I can't risk it." Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, pelting the water's surface in ripples. The sound grew deafening. Layla tried to wrench free, but his grip only tightened. "Let me go," she screamed. Daniel's voice cracked. "You made me do this." They struggled, slipping in the mud, limbs tangled in panic. Layla's phone fell from her pocket, the screen lighting up as it hit the ground, recording still on from earlier that night. The faint red icon blinked through the rain. Her cry echoed once before a splash cut it short. The water swallowed her scream, leaving only the storm. Daniel stood frozen, chest heaving, staring at the rippling surface. For a long moment, there was nothing, no sound but the rain and his ragged breathing. He waded in, searching, but it was too late. Panic clawed at his chest. "Layla," he shouted, voice breaking. "Layla!" The only answer was thunder. When he stumbled back to shore, shaking, The phone caught his eye. Its screen flickered weakly, half-soaked, the red light still blinking. He hesitated, then picked it up, the audio file still running. He pressed stop, erased what he could, and tossed the phone into the fire pit by his cruiser. Flames hissed and crackled, devouring the evidence, or so he thought. Then he stood there, soaked, staring at the dark water where her laughter used to echo. By the time the storm ended, Pine Hollow's most trusted man had become its darkest secret. As dawn approached, Daniel drove home in silence, his eyes hollow. In the rearview mirror, the lake disappeared behind him, but the sound of her final scream refused to fade. The rain had washed away most of the footprints by morning. The lake looked peaceful again, its still surface betraying nothing of the chaos that had unfolded hours before. But in Pine Hollow, peace never lasted long. By noon, whispers had started. Layla Brooks hadn't come home. Her mother, Denise Brooks, called the school, then the diner, then a friend's house. Each call ended the same way. "No, ma'am, we haven't seen her." At first, she told herself maybe Layla had stayed with a friend or missed the bus. But when she found her daughter's favorite jacket still hanging by the door and her phone gone, something inside her cracked. She walked to the sheriff's office, eyes red, clutching a photo. "Sheriff Daniel," she said breathlessly, "Layla didn't come home last night. She always checks in. Always." Daniel looked up from his desk, the practiced calm of authority masking the panic rising in his throat. "When was the last time you saw her?" he asked, voice steady but hollow. "Yesterday evening. She said she was going to the store. Then nothing. It's not like her." He nodded slowly, scribbling notes he didn't need. "We'll find her, Denise. Maybe she just needed space." Her eyes filled. "She's 17, Sheriff. She doesn't just need space." That word, 17, hit him like a hammer. The weight of what he'd done pressed down until he could barely breathe. But he forced a sympathetic smile. "I'll have my deputies start a search right away." By dusk, flyers were being printed. Deputies combed the roads, volunteers gathered flashlights, and the local news picked up the story. "Missing teen, last seen near Miller's Lake." Daniel stood at the edge of the crowd, the glow from the portable lights reflecting in his haunted eyes. His deputy, Tom Weller, approached. "Sir, we found some tire tracks near the lake," he said. "Look like a county cruiser." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Probably mine. I checked the area last night during the storm." Tom nodded. "Makes sense. Weather would have washed most of it anyway." "Keep looking," Daniel said quickly, turning away. As the search dragged into the night, Denise's cries carried across the clearing. "Layla, baby, if you can hear me, please come home." Her voice broke on the last word. Daniel pretended to help, shining his flashlight along the shore, calling her name, but his mind replayed every second of that night. Her screams, the splash, the silence. He felt the walls closing in. A deputy called out, "Sir, we found something." Everyone turned. A phone, waterlogged but intact, had washed up near a cluster of reeds. Denise rushed forward. "That's hers," she whispered, touching it with shaking hands. Daniel froze. His heart pounded so loud he thought everyone could hear it. He'd thrown it into the fire, but the storm must have put it out. "Bag it," he ordered. "We'll check for fingerprints." As the evidence tech sealed it away, Daniel's eyes met the faint red stain on the back of the phone, burned plastic where the recording light had once glowed. By the time the search ended for the night, Denise was sitting on the ground, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the lake. "She's out there," she murmured. "I can feel it." Daniel turned away, unable to look at her. In the distance, thunder rumbled again, soft, but heavy, like a warning. And somewhere deep in his gut, Daniel knew the storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The town of Pine Hollow was changing. What had once been quiet admiration for Sheriff Daniel Hayes was slowly turning into uneasy glances and whispered doubts. The missing girls posters hung on every light pole, every diner window, Layla Brooks' smiling face haunting the town like a ghost that refused to rest. Daniel felt it every time he walked down Main Street. The silence that followed him, the way conversations died mid-sentence. He'd worn the badge for 15 years, but now it felt heavier, like a shackle instead of a symbol. At the station, Deputy Tom Weller dropped a file on his desk. "State investigators are coming in," he said carefully. "They think we need outside help." Daniel looked up sharply. "Outside help? For what?" Tom hesitated. "For Layla. It's been 4 days. Folks are starting to think this isn't just a runaway." Daniel forced a small laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "People always talk, Tom. It's my job to keep them calm." But Tom didn't smile back. "They're not talking, Sheriff. They're accusing." That word hit him harder than he expected. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the framed commendation on the wall, "For outstanding service to Pine Hollow County." His reflection in the glass looked older now, paler. "Let them come," he said quietly. "We have nothing to hide." But he did. And he could feel it, the cracks forming in the story he'd built, in the lie he lived. Later that night, he went back to Miller's Lake alone. The water was calm again, still and black under the moonlight. He walked to the same spot where it happened, his boots sinking slightly in the mud. The rain had washed away the struggle, but the memory was burned into him. He whispered into the darkness, "I didn't mean to," his voice caught, trembling. "You shouldn't have fought me, Layla. You shouldn't have made me." A flashlight beam cut through the trees. "Sheriff." Daniel spun around. It was Detective Maria Santos, one of the state investigators. Early 40s, sharp eyes, the kind that didn't miss much. She approached slowly, her boots crunching over wet leaves. "Didn't expect to find you here this late," she said. Daniel straightened. "Just checking the area. Sometimes the smallest detail shows up after a few days." Maria nodded. "That's dedication. Not many sheriffs would still be out here alone." She paused, scanning the lake. "Funny thing, though, your cruiser's tire tracks were found near this spot the night she vanished." His pulse quickened. "Yeah, I told your team. I was out checking the roads during the storm. Routine patrol." She studied him in silence for a moment. "Storms make people forgetful," she said softly. "But tracks don't lie." He forced a smile. "You implying something, detective?" She returned the smile, though hers was colder. "Not yet." When she left, Daniel exhaled shakily, staring out at the water again. His reflection rippled in the black surface, distorted, broken. Back at the station the next morning, Maria sifted through files while Tom hovered nearby. "You've known the sheriff a long time?" she asked casually. 15 years, Tom said. "He's a good man. But lately," he trailed off. Maria looked up. "Lately what?" Tom sighed. "He's been off. Snapping at people. Disappearing without telling anyone. And he knew Layla. She worked part-time at the diner where he always ate breakfast." Maria tapped her pen. "Did anyone ever mention they were seen together?" He hesitated. "There were rumors." She nodded, jotting something down. "Rumors are where the truth starts to whisper." Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at his phone, the replacement he'd bought after burning the other. Every vibration made him flinch. He'd deleted everything, wiped every trace, yet fear clung to him like smoke. The badge on his chest suddenly felt like a brand, a symbol not of protection, but of guilt. Outside, the townsfolk were beginning to question the very man they once trusted most. And somewhere in the evidence lab, a technician powered on a recovered phone, water-damaged but functional enough to load one file. A single audio recording. Faint at first, then clear, Layla's trembling voice. "Daniel, please. I won't tell anyone." The technician froze, eyes widening. In that moment, the first real crack in Sheriff Daniel Hayes's perfect reputation split wide open. The evidence lab at Pine Hollow County was usually silent, the low hum of machines, the soft clatter of keys. But that morning, the air was thick with something heavier. The technician, Erin Cole, sat frozen at her desk, staring at the computer screen as the faint audio replayed through her headphones. Layla Brooks's voice was unmistakable. Shaky, terrified. "Daniel, please. I won't tell anyone. I swear." Then a man's voice, low, controlled, but laced with anger. "You made me do this." A splash. A scream. Then static. Erin's hands trembled as she hit stop. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The file was damaged, fragmented, but there was no mistaking what it was. A recording of the last moments of the missing girl's life. And the voice of her killer. She didn't want to believe it, but she knew that voice. Everyone in Pine Hollow did. Sheriff Daniel Hayes. Erin backed away from the desk, pulse pounding. Her first instinct was to call Detective Maria Santos, who was overseeing the investigation. But a thought stopped her cold. Daniel's office was just down the hall. He could walk in at any second. Taking a deep breath, she copied the file to a flash drive, slipped it into her pocket, and locked her workstation. Her heart raced as she walked briskly past the sheriff's door. "Morning, Erin," Daniel said, glancing up. His tone was easy, practiced. "Morning, Sheriff," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He nodded, eyes flicking to the folders in her arms. "You working the Brooks evidence today?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. Just cataloging what came in from the lake." He smiled faintly. "Good. Keep me posted." The door closed behind her with a soft click, and only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Within minutes, Erin was at the back entrance, stepping into the gray drizzle that had rolled in over town. She got into her car and drove straight to the motel where Maria Santos was staying. Maria opened the door mid-knock, hair tied back, eyes sharp. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Erin handed her the flash drive. "You need to hear this." "And him." Maria's brow furrowed. She plugged it into her laptop, hit play, and for a moment the small motel room filled with the voice of a girl begging for her life. When the file ended, Maria sat completely still. Then, quietly, "This is enough to bring him in." Erin nodded. "There's more on the damaged drive. I can try to recover it." Maria's tone hardened. "Do it. But keep your mouth shut until I say otherwise. If the sheriff catches wind of this before we move." "I understand," Erin said quickly. Maria closed her laptop, eyes narrowing. "He's been hiding behind that badge for too long. It's time we see what he does when the badge no longer protects him." As Erin left, rain began to fall harder, drumming against the motel window. Maria stood there for a long moment, watching the storm roll in. Outside, the sirens in the distance began to wail, not for an emergency yet, but for something coming. In the sheriff's office, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "We know what you did by the lake." He froze, staring at the words. For the first time, the sheriff's calm cracked. The news hit Pine Hollow like a thunderclap. Sheriff Daniel Hayes arrested for the murder of missing teen Layla Brooks. By morning, the streets were lined with news vans, microphones, and strangers with cameras. The man who once symbolized law and order now stood handcuffed on the courthouse steps, face pale under the gray light. Detective Maria Santos watched as Daniel was led inside. She'd seen killers before, men who lied, men who broke. But there was something different about him. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just stared straight ahead, as though already somewhere far away. In the courtroom, the air felt thick with judgment. Layla's mother, Denise Brooks, sat in the front row, her trembling hands clutching her daughter's photo. When Daniel entered, her jaw tightened. For weeks she'd prayed for answers. Now she had one, but it was the kind that left no peace behind. The prosecutor's voice filled the room. On the night of August 14th, Sheriff Daniel Hayes met 17-year-old Layla Brooks at Miller's Lake. He took advantage of his authority, concealed their affair, and when she threatened to expose him, he silenced her forever. Daniel sat motionless, eyes fixed on the table. The recording, that cursed audio, played again for the jury. Layla's voice pleading. The splash. His own voice, unmistakable. "You made me do this." Each word stabbed through the room like broken glass. His defense attorney rose. "The audio is incomplete. There's no body, no weapon, no physical evidence of murder." Maria's voice cut through the murmur from the gallery. "There's enough." She took the stand, recounting the timeline, the hidden messages, the matching tire tracks, the false reports Daniel filed the night of the storm. Piece by piece, she built the truth, each fact a nail in the coffin of his once spotless reputation. When Daniel finally took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. "Did you love her?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel hesitated, eyes glistening. "I thought I did. But it wasn't love. It was weakness, mine." "Did you kill her?" His throat worked as he tried to speak. "It was an accident," he said finally. "She slipped. I tried to save her." His voice broke. "I swear I tried." A hush swept the room. Maria watched him closely, the way his hands trembled, the way guilt had carved deep lines into his face. Denise stood then, voice trembling but strong. "You took my baby. You took her life, and then you wore that uniform like you still deserved to be called good." The judge banged the gavel, but her words lingered, echoing through every heart in that room. When the verdict came, it was swift and unanimous, guilty of manslaughter and obstruction of justice. As the guards led Daniel away, he turned once toward the gallery. His eyes met Denise's, filled with sorrow, maybe even relief. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She didn't answer. She simply looked away. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle this time, almost cleansing. Maria stood beneath it, watching the courthouse lights flicker against the wet pavement. Justice had been served, but no one felt victorious. In the distance, the lake lay quiet under the storm clouds, as though keeping the last of its secrets buried. But Pine Hollow would never forget. Months passed, but Pine Hollow still carried the echo of the trial. The courthouse was quieter now, yet the town remained unsettled, like a wound that had scabbed over but never healed. The banners calling for justice were gone, but the whispers remained. Denise Brooks walked down Main Street with a slow, deliberate calm. People nodded when she passed, some offering soft condolences, others keeping their distance. She had become both a symbol of strength and a reminder of tragedy. In her hands, she carried a single white rose, the kind Layla used to tuck behind her ear. She drove out to Miller's Lake, the place where everything had ended and, in a way, begun. The water was still again, glinting faintly beneath the morning sun. The world around her looked peaceful, but peace, she knew, was an illusion. Kneeling by the edge, she placed the rose in the water. "You can rest now, baby," she whispered. "They can't hurt you anymore." For a moment, she thought she heard Layla's laughter, faint, carried by the wind, and her eyes welled up. "You were more than what they said. More than what he made you." She stayed there until the rose drifted out of sight. Meanwhile, inside a gray concrete cell 2 counties away, Daniel Hayes sat on his bunk, staring at the small square of sky through the barred window. The uniform he wore now was a far cry from the one he once carried with pride. His hands, once steady on a trigger and badge, trembled as he held a letter, one he'd written but never sent. To Denise Brooks, "I know there's nothing I can say that would undo what I did. I took something pure and turned it into pain. Every night I hear her voice. Every morning, I wake up hoping it's still a dream. But it isn't. Maybe prison is where I belong. Maybe this is what justice feels like." He folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it under his pillow, afraid to mail it, afraid not to. Outside his cell, the guards called for lights out. Daniel lay back, the sound of rain faint against the roof, the same kind of rain that once hid his crime. He thought of Layla's smile, of the moment everything changed. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the dark, but even he knew it meant nothing now. Back in town, Detective Maria Santos closed the final report on the Brooks case. She stared at the stack of files, months of evidence, lies, and pain, and shut it with a sigh. Justice had been done, but it had come at a price too high for anyone to celebrate. As night fell over Pine Hollow, the wind rustled through the pines, carrying the last trace of Layla Brooks, a name that would forever haunt the town, and a truth that would never quite rest. A year had passed since the verdict, but the story of Sheriff Daniel Hayes and Layla Brooks still lingered in Pine Hollow like smoke that refused to clear. People went back to their routines. The diner reopened, the church bells rang on Sundays, yet nothing truly returned to normal. Every conversation still paused when someone mentioned the lake. Every shadow in that town seemed to remember. Detective Maria Santos sat alone in her car overlooking Miller's Lake one last time before heading out of Pine Hollow for good. The case had left a mark on her, not just professionally, but somewhere deeper. She'd seen corruption before, but never in someone the whole town had trusted so completely. Daniel's face still appeared in her thoughts sometimes, not as the sheriff, not even as the killer, but as a man broken by his own choices. She looked out at the water and whispered, "It's over now, Layla." But even as she said it, the water rippled, soft like a sigh. Down by the shoreline, Denise Brooks had built a small memorial, a wooden cross, wildflowers, and a framed photo of her daughter smiling at the camera, forever 17. She visited every week, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit. On this day, she brought a notebook. Inside were pages of letters she'd written to Layla, words she never got to say. She tore one page out, read it softly, and left it beneath the frame. "You were more than what they said you were. You were light. And even in death, you made the truth come out." A single tear fell, landing on the paper. At the state prison, Daniel Hayes spent most of his days in silence. The guard said he rarely spoke, rarely slept. He'd been moved to solitary after a fight with another inmate, a man who recognized him from the news. Now, he spent his time staring through the slit in his cell door, waiting for something he couldn't name. One evening, a guard slipped an envelope under his door, no return address. Inside was a photo, the memorial at the lake, the cross, the flowers, and the words "Justice Never Dies" etched into the frame. Daniel closed his eyes, pressing the photo to his chest. For the first time in months, he let himself cry. In Pine Hollow, the seasons changed. The leaves turned gold, the air softened, and though the town carried scars, it learned to breathe again. The story of Layla Brooks became a warning, not just about love twisted into obsession, but about the danger of blind trust. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the reflection on the lake shimmered like glass, beautiful, fragile, and deceptive. Some said that on quiet nights, when the water was still, they could hear a girl's laughter echo faintly across the shore. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it was something else, the echo of truth that refused to be silenced. And for Pine Hollow, that echo would never fade. The end.